And our readings today, the first one is going to be from Leviticus 25, 8 to 12.
Donna's reading.
Donna's reading. That's Donna. Okay.
I was waiting for my introduction.
Oh, okay. And I just want to add that after the scripture readings, we have a special guest today, Dan Richards. Where is he? Oh, hi, Dan. Okay. And he will be giving the message today. And if you didn't know this before, I'm going to tell you now, we are recording it. Oh, I'm so glad you're good with that. Thank you.
Okay, as Wanda said, the first reading is from Leviticus 25, 8 to 12. You shall count off 7 weeks of years, 7 times 7 years, so that the period of 7 weeks of years gives 49 years. Then you shall have the trumpet sounded loud on the 10th day of the 7th month on the Day of Atonement. You shall have the trumpet sounded throughout all your land, and you shall hallow the 50th year, and you shall proclaim liberty throughout the land to all its inhabitants. It shall be a jubilee for you. You shall return, every one of you, to your property, and every one of you to your family. That 50th year shall be a jubilee for you. You shall not sow or reap the aftergrowth, or harvest the unpruned vines, for it is a jubilee. It shall be holy to you. You shall eat only what the field itself produces. And the next reading comes from Ruth 1, 15 to 18. So she said, "See, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law." But Ruth said, "Do not press me to leave you or to turn back from following you. Where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. There will I be buried. May the Lord do thus and so to me, and more as well, if even death parts me from you." When Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more to her. And the last reading comes from Matthew 25, 31 to 40. When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. And he will put the sheep at his right hand, and the goats at his left. Then the king will say to those at his right hand, "Come, you that are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you took care of me. I was in prison, and you visited me." Then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when was it that we saw you hungry and gave you food, or thirsty and gave you something to drink? And when was it we saw you a stranger and welcomed you, or naked and gave you clothing? And when was it that we saw you sick in prison and visited you?" And the king will answer them, "Truly I tell you, just as you did to one of the least of these who are members of my family, you did it to me."
Come on up, Dan. Meanwhile, I'll try to find everything going.
And you give me the clicker, so I can go through.
Sure.
Excellent. Well, thank you for inviting me today to share about what's been happening at Kenesserie Camp over the last little while. I didn't realize it was the anniversary service, and I certainly hope this goes better than an anniversary service I spoke at years ago when I was up at Lambton United Church Center. That was not a great one, but I think I'll do better today, because that one they wanted me to sermonize, and I'm not really sermonizing today, just sharing with you what's happening at camp. But in that verses we just heard, we do a lot of those things at camp. We feed the hungry, we give drink to the thirsty, welcome strangers, clothe them. Remember campers that we have to find clothing for. We do all those things at camp, so that was really, I could connect with that. Anyway, my name's Dan Richards, and I was thinking earlier this weekend, yesterday when I was thinking about today, I was trying to remember how many times I've been in Tupperville United Church, because even though I grew up 8 minutes up the river, we Dresden United, right on the edge of Dresden, so we were Dresden United, but I think the first time I was here was 32 years ago. Potentially on this same Sunday, probably dressed in a t-shirt, so I've upgraded slightly, not a lot, but probably a t-shirt and probably shorts, because I was I think the summer director, and that was a year where we blanketed all the churches in the former Kent Presbytery to share the work we were doing on the Spirit Center. And so members of staff and board members went to all the churches, and I hadn't thought about that. You know what I did, because I remember going over to Salem, that was over in 78, right? Yeah. And then coming here and sharing a little bit about camp then. And then I think I've been back once or twice, probably for a presbytery meeting at some point, but I think this is only the second time behind the pulpit. So that gives an idea how long I've been kind of in connection with Kenesserie Camp. So really quick, I'm going to tell a little bit about my camp story, and then I'm going to talk about what's happened at camp over the last few years. Some of you know some details about the story and some don't, so whoops, I'm going to knock things off. And so I'll just kind of share what's happening. So there's a potential that I wouldn't be standing here if Kenesserie Camp didn't exist, because in the mid-60s, a young farm guy from just up the river and a young woman from Chatham met at camp. My parents, Janet and Phil, met at camp for that's where they first met, at a Young People's Union weekend. And then following the family trend, I met my wife Samantha when we were both CITs together at camp in 1986. And in fact, Mark met his wife Chris, my older brother, met his wife at camp in 1986 as well, when we were all CITs together. And then I was thinking today that since then, there's maybe only 2 summers that I haven't had direct active involvement in camping, in a summer camp of some kind since then. So I was on staff at Kenesserie till the mid-90s, and then in the late 90s I ended up and then I was on the board, and then I left and went to Lambton United Church Center for 10 years. Then we lived in New Zealand for 2 years, where I managed a Presbyterian church camp. And then we returned in 2009, in August of 2009, and I think there was somebody was holding off the chair at the time, because about 2.5 weeks after we got home, the phone rang one night. I said, "Are you guys settled in?" Yeah, it's nice talking to you. Yeah. "Do you guys want to be on the board? Please come be on the board of camp." And so then began my second kind of act at Kenesserie on the board, and then transitioning to staff part-time in 2017, and then beginning full-time staff again, go back into full-time camping. My first day was February the 17th of 2020. And if you think about the timing of that Kenesserie took that leap of faith, that we knew we needed somebody full-time to get to take us in the right direction. So the camp had taken a big bite of providing the full-time salary, and then we had quite a challenge for the next 2 summers after that. And then in 22, we returned to camp, return of campers. Staffing was a struggle in 22. We never ran a camp with such a lean staff, and I'm not talking lean, I'm just talking not enough. Because some of us weren't particularly lean, but multiple people doing multiple roles, some people covering 3 positions essentially, and we did have to cancel our first session because of COVID amongst a couple of our key staff members. And so people said, "Well, you didn't prepare if you had to cancel because of only 2 staff." And I said, "You don't understand how tough it was for camps across North America, let alone here, to find staff post-pandemic." And so we got through that, and we entering 2023 with a whole bunch of returning staff, and a fantastic group. We had, I think by the end of March, we had 12 or 15 counselors in training signed up already, which is a big number for us anyways, but to have that many in March. Then by the beginning of June, we had 19 CITs signed up, but there was this swirling cloud that I just didn't know about. And then on the 7th of June, I got this strange email from our health inspector. So we want to meet prior to your scheduled opening inspection at the end of June, which I booked months before, or a month before, to talk about your camp safety plan in connection to the erosion on the bluffs. I'm like, oh. Because in August of 22, the health unit, or the building department came out at the request of the Conservation Authority, which was prompted by our health inspector. They did some measurements and took some pictures. And then 2 weeks later, we got a report that included a letter from the Conservation Authority, but in the part from the building department, it said no further actions required by us, meaning the building department. So that means they're not issuing a do not occupy. They didn't see any concern. And then on the 25th of May of 23, the building department was back out. And it just happened to be as I was wrapping up my fire inspection. And I said, what are you guys doing here? Oh, we just want to take a look at the bluff again. I'm like, oh, but didn't we take care of that in the, we just want to look at it again. I said, okay, all right. And we looked at the bluff and they said, we don't see any issues. So for me, that was twice that the department that I assumed was going to make those kind of decisions was giving us the A-OK. And we had lost a little bit of bluff, but there hasn't been any major erosion, nothing unusual. We lost about 10 feet by the cabins closest to the bluff, and that's the first erosion we'd experienced there in the 12 years that I'd been back and involved in camping since like 2009. So I guess it was like 13 years. And if anyone doesn't know the bluffs at Kenesserie, they're not, the bluffs the other side of Blenheim are straight up and down, but the bluffs at Kenesserie are like this. There's a buffer built in. But anyways, made a couple of phone calls after I got this request for a special meeting. Came to realize that I think I knew what was coming, but then it was worse. So if I had my worst case scenario in my head of what was going to happen on the 15th of June when we were having this meeting with the health unit, it went beyond that. And we found out on the 15th of June, so 2 weeks before staff came in, two and a half weeks before staff, 3 weeks before campers, that we couldn't use anything inside the long-term stable slope line. And so that's a 3-to-1 line, so 3 feet of horizontal distance for every foot of elevation. So for us, that's 225 feet because there's 75 feet of elevation. But in reality, it's only about 130, 150 feet of our area because there's 75 feet of distance between the top of the bluff and what they call the toe of the bluff, where the bluff would touch the water. So there was no way getting around it, and that was devastating news because that was 6 of our cabins. So anybody who's been to camp knows that our cabins are in pairs, and it was the dining hall. And so I'm like, what are we going to do? We've got 2 weeks to figure this out. So I want to get to some slides, but real quick, these are some pictures from last summer. Some of the things camp does, it fosters growth and independence. It creates time for play and fun. Oops, what did that one say? Can I go back? There we go. Builds community and purpose and teaches teamwork and cooperation and supports healthy living. Encourages a connection with nature. Those girls have just returned from a ravine hike. So the only way we get to the lake or anywhere close to the lake these days is hiking through the ravine, and then we don't even go all the way because there's not enough time. And it invests in youth. That's our summer staff from last year. Not all of us in that picture are youth, but most of us are. Don't tell Samantha I said that. And camp makes connections. So we're moving to solid ground as a result of this. So there's our overhead shot. So there's what I wanted to, does there have like a little pointer thing on here?
I think so.
No, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. I can reach. So if you look here, this 3-to-1 line is kind of like there. All the way north of the dining hall. And you can't see all the cabins in that picture, but there's 3 sets of cabins that are touched by that line. And so that's where we had to move north of. So how did we respond last year? 2 days of trying to change it. Called a counselor, talked to the mayor, had a meeting with the CAO and the general manager of community and health services. No success. Reached out to a lawyer because we thought this seemed an unreasonable action with an unreasonable time frame to look into getting an emergency injunction to stop it for the summer, let us get through the summer, and then we could deal with it in the fall. And that lawyer said he would take up the case. It'd be somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000, which, because he was going to have to drop everything else he was doing to do this. But there was no guarantee of success, and it was going to be a 2-week time frame to get that done. And in 2 weeks, we had staff coming in. In 3 weeks, we had campers coming in. So on the 19th of June, we had an emergency board meeting, at which point I shared the options that I had found. The other piece, we looked into appealing this decision, but because it wasn't an order from the health unit, but simply we're not going to open you if you plan to use that space, it wasn't appealable because it wasn't an order. And they knew that. They had done their work because I said, I'm just going to appeal this. And they said, well, you can't. So, thank you. So we decided on the 19th of June that we were going to go ahead with the summer and figure a way through it. I'd already done some preliminary calling by that point to find if we could find a place to cook. And so we rented a commercial kitchen trailer from a gentleman in Cornwall. Because the other place that people suggested was who Deer Run used years ago when their clubhouse burnt down just before the season started. I called them, they're out of Toronto. They said, yeah, we have a kitchen trailer available in January of 24. So that doesn't help us. So the next guy I called, he had one. We booked it, and it cost almost $30,000 for that. And then we had to figure out what we're going to do with the kids. Well, we were able to cap registration. The week before, when I kind of got an inkling of what was happening, I lowered our numbers available for kids to sign up online, because I thought we weren't maybe going to be able to use the 2 sets of cabins closest to the bluff, but then they threw the one in over on the edge of the bush that we couldn't use it. So we took the Environmental Learning Center, so I don't know if anyone remembers, it's a portable on your left on the way in that got moved in there in the early 2000s. And we were doing some work on the outside of that, and we accelerated the renovations on the inside and turned it into a double cabin. And so we were able to run at 70% capacity. And we had to move our dishwasher into a 20-foot sea container out on the lawn beside the trailer we were cooking out of. And we bought 2 big 20 by 40 tents that we put up, and that's what we ate under. And that's how we got through the year. Everything seemed cramped and temporary, but it's surprising that once we got the dishwasher, which meant we could actually use our plates, because we were a week and a half staff training, 2 days of the first camp, we were using paper. Then all of a sudden it felt more like camp. We're back into rhythm or routine, and we got on our way. And we had 464 campers at camp last summer. We employed 30 local youth and young adults, and we had a great season. It went well, it finished well, and we had no issues. And then we're facing the fall with what are we going to do next? And so what we're going to do next is, maybe that's the next slide. There's what we're going to do. So the 3 cabins are outlined on the cabins to be moved. We're going to relocate those cabins, and they're going to go where those squares are over by the other field. I don't know if you can see where I'm talking, because I haven't labeled them very well, but these squares, the outlines over here up by the Spirit Center, we're going to move those. And we just staked them out Friday, and I think the ground's going to start to be peeled away around where those pads are going to go early next week. And so we're going to move 2 and leave them together, and the 1 pair we're going to cut in half and have 2 individual cabins just oriented a different direction. That's going to make things more flexible for us around cabin assignments, and it's also going to be where our CITs stay on the weeks that we have full cohorts of CITs there. And then, but the cabin move is not the difficult thing, because I think there's some people in this room who have probably helped with cabin moves before, because we moved 2 sets of cabins before, and 1 maybe has been moved twice. But the big thing is the kitchen and dining hall. And so the Spirit Center, which is the last major capital project that's happened at camp, is going to be transformed into our new dining hall and have a 20-foot wide addition built along the back of it. And that addition is going to house the kitchen, a serving area, and a storage room. And so one way we're transforming the Spirit Center. Has anybody been in the Spirit Center before? Does anybody think it was bright and airy? No, it was dark and dingy. It was built like a gymnasium, right? And so it was all dark plywood, and there was a total of 5 windows, and then just a little bit of light that came through the 2 doors. And so prior to this decision being forced upon us, we had applied to the Trillium Foundation for some funding to change the nature of the Spirit Center, because groups that come in, nobody really looking for a gym anymore. In 1992, that's what everybody wanted. But a lot of the groups that come now are adult groups and looking for bright, airy meeting space. So we've switched out and put 14 7-foot by 2-foot windows in it. 8 on the wall facing the field and 6 on the wall facing the bush. And the end wall, this is what I would call the south wall, but it's not quite oriented north-south. It's actually more the east wall. But anyways, and it's totally changed the nature and feel of the Spirit Center. We're going to coat the floor in there with an epoxy resin coating and replace the sliding barn door with a roll-up garage door that seals. So now we're going to be eating in there. And then we're putting that addition on the back. So that is going to allow us to run at full capacity, have a fantastic new spot to eat. And the reason we're putting a storage room on that building is because another Trillium grant we received is allowing us to buy new tables and chairs that are going to be easy to move and put away, so we can still have the space of the Spirit Center to do everything but play basketball or volleyball in. Because with all those windows, it's not suitable to have balls floating around there. One point I thought, maybe we could do something, and then as soon as I saw something, I was like, no. We're not going to do that. And so that's where we at. That's where we're at, and that's our plan. And there was a point during this that we had to decide, is this worth it? Is this worth doing? Because there's always been a push or a discussion about, do we have too many United Church camps in Southwest Ontario? Because contrary to a lot of other places in Canada of the United Church, if we go back, we'll pretend like the old London Conference, no other conference across Canada had a camp in every presbytery, or almost a camp in every presbytery. It was only London Conference. So there's long been discussion about that. But when I think about the fact that the only other local summer camp, overnight summer camp in Chatham-Kent, is closed, at Camp Vincent, St. Vincent de Paul camp, and not likely to reopen in the same manner that it did before, likely not as a summer camp, that yes, there's a camp. Pierce Williams is 35 minutes from Kenesserie Camp, and Guestwood is maybe an hour from Kenesserie Camp down in Essex. But our kids aren't going to travel. These 500 kids are almost all, over 80% of them are from Chatham-Kent. And then the other 20%, almost all of those are what we would call legacy campers. Campers whose parents had such an important and foundational experience at Kenesserie that they send their kids no matter where they are, whether they're Windsor, London, Toronto, Mississauga. We've had some from Halliburton. They send them back because that's where they want them to get the same campus experience. In fact, we had a camper from Texas. My sister-in-law sent her kids from Texas and another from Michigan. Another, not sister-in-law, but another family from Michigan send their kids. So we had to decide, is this worth it? That was a large part of our discussions as a board in the fall. We decided it was, that where are these kids going to get the experience they get at camp? They're not. They're not going to travel, and we can take some of them, but they're not going to all travel. So we made that decision, and we decided it was worth it. So there's the layout, and I have some drawings downstairs, so after you can stop and look at them if you're interested, but the existing building is in the light, and then the stage of that is on the left side of the screen, right? Yeah. And then the back, what I would call the back side of the Spirit Center is where the addition's going. So you see a door in from the end by the pool. So to orient everybody, the left-hand side, if you've been there, that's the end that the pool is at by the Spirit Center. Then we just have a pantry and a walk-in cooler, and then a very large kitchen, serving window into the serving area, but we also going to have the ability to put a large two-sided buffet table in the serving area if we want, and then that small room on the end is storage of tables and chairs, and then there's a janitor's closet in there. And there is a view from the, if you're standing in the bush looking at it, and then it's going to be a pole barn style structure. And there's what it's going to look like from each end. These are old images, so they don't have the images we submitted to the building department have the new windows in them, but they're not there. So what does that mean? We need to raise $500,000, which is a lot of money. I understand that, and I'm not here asking for money. I'm just telling you what we're doing, and we're on our way to that. And some of our quotes are coming in at less than we anticipated originally, But we're still going to need close to 300 to do all the building we need. I mean, just moving the cabins and putting roofs on the ones that need it and pouring the concrete, that's going to be about 40,000. Now, I just found out on Friday that a local foundation is giving us half of that. And so that's encouraging. It's always nice to get those emails on a Friday afternoon after a long week. The equipment fund, 100,000, that's going to be for unanticipated things that might need to go into the kitchen, but that also is for a hydro upgrade. One of the reasons that our trailer last year, the kitchen trailer, originally thought, we'll just park beside the Spirit Center, we'll eat in the Spirit Center, we'll make it work. Not enough juice at the Spirit Center, not enough power at the Spirit Center to run the commercial kitchen because it was built to be a gymnasium with lights and a sound system. So we're upgrading our hydro by changing where it comes in and putting in a ground-mounted transformer. Whether it happens for the summer or not, don't know, but our electrician is going to make it so that we can operate the kitchen, whether it happens or not. And the sustainability fund is just going to be for the upgrades. Every time you make changes and improve things, you have extra expenses. And so we're going to create a little fund to go in there. But yeah, that's what's happening at camp. Now, one of the things that I love about camp is it's about new experiences and new challenges. And one of the things we kept saying last summer is we can do hard things. We can figure it out. At one point, the last slide in this had some wording, or I guess it was in the video that I shared. We discovered that things are figure-outable if you just can put your mind to it. I don't want to repeat that 2.5 weeks from the 15th of June to the 1st of July last year. There was days I stepped out of the house, had to collect my thoughts and go, okay, what's the next thing that has to happen? Like I said, I had to what do we need to have? Because on top of all that, we had to drill a new well last year. Our old well didn't run dry, but the casing started to deteriorate. And we'd had our 5-year inspection by the water inspector, or the well inspector, whatever, one of the results of the Walkerton tragedy. And I don't begrudge them. And they said, well, you need to have a down well inspection of your well. So we'd Rumbles come out and take a look at that because our regular well guy doesn't have the right letter or number on his ticket to do that. And the casing was deteriorating, so we had to drill a new well. And I thought that was going to be our biggest challenge last year. Now that became a headache too because there was other issues there, but yeah, we had got through that. We got through this, and we're ramping up for this coming summer. We're almost completely staffed already. We have about 4 positions. We need a head lifeguard. They have to be 18 and have guarded before. An assistant cook, and then a couple of male counselors. But everything feels like we're heading, like we've got some momentum and steam. And the framing on this should start a week from tomorrow, as long as the rain doesn't keep delaying things. The biggest delay so far is when we can't get the stumps out of the trees we cut down behind the Spirit Center because the stumper can't get back there. It's too wet. But he's going to work with our concrete guy, and a skid steer is going to be involved, and they're going to get it back there beginning next week. And then by the first weekend in June, which is still our walkathon and open house, the June the 2nd, I believe, is the Sunday, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep. Sue's gonna walk.
Yes.
Raise money.
Yes. Always does.
So if you would like to sponsor, that would be good.
And some people say, well, why are you doing that while you're doing the other? Well, because the walkathon has always been the one fundraiser we do that goes into our operational expenses. And those operational expenses haven't decreased. And so we're still doing that while we're doing the capital campaign. So it's 2 separate things. But yeah, it's worth it. It's important, I think, to do. And then I was just on the way here, I was listening to some music. And I'm about to wrap up. I was meant to start my timer because my wife's Samantha's not here doing this in the back. That's her trim the fat, Dan. Tighten it up. Let's get through this. She's at home packing because today's our moving day to move to camp. Because our staff, some of our staff move out tonight, start tomorrow. Oh, what do I have to do? Oh, I was on show. I'm going to read some. Anyways, there's a song called the Summer Camp Song. And it was written for the International Camping Congress when it was held in Quebec. So the International Camping Congress is a loose organization of camp associations from different countries around the world. There's hundreds of people, whoops, oh. Sorry about that. There's hundreds of camp organizations involved in that. But he starts this song, and he was a camp guy, this guy, now he's a recording artist. How can I explain what I take away when the autumn falls and we go our separate ways? What it is exactly, how can I describe all that I discovered by that fireside? And then here's the lines I really like. Some things aren't defined. Some things, they're just right. Because there's more than the green of trees. There's more than the summer breeze, the smell of rocks and water washing over me. It's more than the orange fire. It's more than the fishing wire. It's more than the cabin walls or that morning bugle call. It's something you can't touch, but you can hold so dear. And so it's difficult sometimes if people haven't been to camp or haven't had the experience of camp to describe how life-changing it can be, but it just is. And he's captured it nicely in that song. And it's just to not be able to offer that to the next generation of campers coming through, or the generation after that, or the generation after that would be a great disservice to our community, I think. And so that's why I think camp is so important, and why we're pressing forward in doing this. And I know that with these churches, I'm preaching to the choir. I know my back's been to this choir, but you know, if we think about churches that are big supporters of camp, you guys are that. And so I want to wrap up by saying thank you for that support. Like for years and years and years, right? 30 years ago, you're one of the big supporters of camp. And 30 years later, you're still here, which is a testament to your commitment to your community, and you're still a big supporter of camp. And so thank you for that. Thank you for believing, and thank you for giving me the time to let you know what's happened at camp and where we're heading. I'll be downstairs after for a bit, so if you have any questions about what we're doing. And then there is some literature on the table. There is a little pamphlet that kind of describes what we're doing. If there's anybody that you think might be interested that's not here today, and you could take that and share it with them, or if you want one. And there's also little postcards that have our summer schedule on it, our programs and our sessions. So if you're interested in that. So I will be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Well, thank you very much, Dan Richards, for coming to us talking about Kenesserie Camp.